Hey, Dave Molenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I actually found somebody that can transform your sales in 4 words. So before you go, there's no way possible. We're going to find out what those 4 words are, and we're going to talk about some ways to transform your sales. Now, I'm sure nobody on this today needs this but me. But if you are not in the spot sales wise, where you want to be, then I would encourage you to hang out for the next half hour or so. I'm honored to be hanging out with Kahn. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you are CEO of Select Sales Development, and we have to tell the world how we spell select. So how do we spell select?
We spell it SELLECT,
Absolutely.
but we actually want you to stop selling. We want you to start getting selected. Get it? See what we did there?
There you go. Awesome. Well, we're going to talk a bunch about sales today, and I'm honored again to be hanging out with you, fellow author. You wrote Myth Shift, work on some podcasts in the past, so there's a ton of information here. So fill us in a little bit on what Select Sales Development does before we jump into the content today.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the last more than 20 years, I've been doing training, coaching, consulting, sales teams, entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals, people that may not even want to recognize themselves as salespeople, but they have an expertise and they need to get that out in the world. And so, bam, they find themselves in business development conversations. So
Right.
what we do at Select is we do training programs and live programs and virtual programs. We speak at conferences, some different ways that we work with teams and entrepreneurs to make sure that they're shortening their selling cycle. They're not frustrated by people who try to pick their brain and then they don't want to pay them for it, things like that.
Wow, cool. Well, should we talk about those 4 words, or should we make people wait a little bit just in
You
anticipation?
know, they're so good. I hate to make people wait.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you one thing before, and then we can jump into that. So, because you brought it up, and it's funny how, sales tends to be looked at as a bad thing. So we all fight that. And I always laugh when I think back to third grade, and nobody that I remember raised their hand when the teacher said, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Right. I don't remember, Merritt, anybody saying, "Oh, I can't wait to graduate high school so I can go down to Joe's Used Cars and sell cars," right? There were all
Well,
these other things, but yet so many people are selling now. So I'm just curious if you run into that stigma in your practice as well.
I definitely do run into that. But had I been in your third grade class, I'd have blown your mind because I probably would have raised my hand.
Okay, first of
my
all, you weren't even born yet when I was in third grade, but thank you so
uh,
much for saying that, because I think that you're the first then, because everybody that I talk to, they're like, yeah, whoever was even thinking about that in third grade. So you had it on your mind in third grade, huh?
I probably did. My grandfather had a used car dealership. My grandmother sold Avon. My dad sold advertising. My mom sold real estate. It was honestly never a question of what's Merritt going to do in her life. It was really more a question of what's Merritt going to sell.
There you go.
So I was indoctrinated pretty young, but yeah, I had a door-to-door greeting card business. I sold the
Wow.
most Girl Scout cookies. Like I
Nice.
had it going on. I knew what I was doing.
That's awesome. And when you took your disc assessment, which was awesome, you're very high on the I part, which you love to talk to people and you love to have that communication. So that obviously adds, to it as well. So, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Without further ado, if I had a drum roll, if we had a high budget for this stuff, we'd have, live music in the background. We don't. So, what are the 4 words that can transform somebody's sales?
Well, if you're open to it, I would be happy to share them with you. In fact, I might actually have already just done that. What?
Uh-oh.
um, yeah. Let me ask you this. Let's start this
Sure.
way.
Yeah, for sure.
If I were to ask you, hey, Dave, are you interested in hearing about all the sales training programs that I offer and hearing about all the different things that I can do for you? Are you interested in that?
Yeah, a lot of times that's where the wall goes up, right? For prospects.
Right. Exactly. It's very easy to say
Yep.
that you're not interested in something
Yep.
because it's not a hit on who you are as an individual. It's
Sure.
it's separate from your identity. But if I were to ask you, "Hey Dave, are you open to having a conversation with me about some of the things that I do in the world?" It's a little
Right.
harder to say no to. Is that a fair statement?
Sure. Absolutely. Totally fair.
Yeah. And the reason is because most of us want to identify as somebody who's open minded. In fact, I
Okay.
was looking at some research out of Pepperdine University recently, and there was a study that was done where 95% of people rated themselves as more open minded than the average person. Now, I don't know what they're teaching at Pepperdine, but I don't think that
Yeah.
math works.
Right. Exactly. Wow. Did they
So,
have anything to say what it actually was, or is that just kind of they leave it at that for you?
no, that for this particular study, that was what they were really looking to find out was how do
Sure.
people
Sure.
recognize themselves?
Gotcha.
And that's a fascinating pit of information. Now, I've been doing sales management, trading, coaching, consulting, speaking, writing for, like I said, more than 20 years.
Sure.
And what I realized, unfortunately, a little later in my career than I would like to admit, is that nothing happens until you open someone's mind.
Yep.
So the first step to a closed deal is an open mind. And
Gotcha.
the best way to do that is with four simple words, which is nothing more than, are you open to? And then fill in the blank. Are
Excellent.
In fact, when I do keynote speeches, programs for large conferences and things, sales kickoff meetings, I usually start with some entertaining story in the beginning. And then my question to the audience is, have you already decided it can't get any better? Or are you open to a new possibility? And that question is really hard for people to say, nope, not open minded to a new possibility, just going to stick with the possibilities I got in front of me, totally
Sure.
closed to anything new. And so
Yep.
they have to be open to receiving your value. And it's a great opening for an event or anything like that, a big meeting, because it sets the stage for people to hear all of the
Sure.
other good programs and events and things that are planned.
Well, but I gotta say, I'm just curious on if you run into, excuse me, some resistance on that merit, because there are personalities that are naturally skeptical. They're naturally closed. That really, those words to some people listening right now they're uncomfortable with that because they're thinking outside the box is not how they're built. So
Mm.
how do you address that if I want to, let's say, be open to it, but I'm really hesitant and skeptical? What happens at that intersection there?
Yeah, I find that people, even the most skeptical people, they have to just at least pause and
Okay.
consider what's possible for them if they're open to at least hearing it. So I think, if I really haven't had many bad responses to "Are you open to?" I think when people try to get fancy, like they hear that coaching from me, and it almost sounds so easy,
Sure.
so basic that they
Sure.
want to fancy it up, and so then they doctor it, and then you mess with it, and it's like, don't mess with it. Just keep those four
Easy.
words pure and simple. You're much more likely to get a good result, because it's really hard. Even the skeptical people don't want to identify as being closed to a possibility.
Sure. Wow. So, but I would feel like if I was a buyer, if this was a situation where I almost feel like I'm showing you my cards. In today's sales dance, it's so sad where, the prospect keeps their cards so close to their chest. Nobody in the world's going to get in to see what's really going on. So how does this break that down if I'm very closed and you asked, are you open to, obviously the next part has to be well crafted. Otherwise, am I open to, you know, I could say, yeah, no, because it doesn't interest me. So that second part's got to be just almost as important as the first part, I would think.
You're absolutely right. So there's two angles to this. So number one, if somebody were to say, no, I am not open to a new possibility, I'm not open to having a conversation, I'm not open to anything, I'm just like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. In that case, I would enjoy the new free time I have just made available for myself, and I'm not going to have any more of a conversation, because
Sure.
there's nothing you're going to say after that if somebody's really committed to not being open. So that's the first part. The
Sure.
second part is, if what you follow that up with, if you follow "Are you open to" up with something that is all about you, you are not going to be very successful. So if
Gotcha.
I were to say to you, "Are you open to hearing about all the great work that I do and how our programs work and all the things that, me," I'm still setting you up to be somewhat defensive about that.
Gotcha.
But if I am careful and deliberate about putting the issue into your world, so maybe, are you open to having a conversation with me about what you've already tried, how it worked, how it, what wasn't perfect yet? Let's have that conversation. So that's
Sure.
about you, right?
Okay.
Are you
Yep.
open to, um, uh, you know, sharing with me what's really going on? Are you open to telling me straight what's
Hmm.
happening? And I just find that that's a lot easier than, okay, so why don't you tell me what's happening? And then, like, the defense wall is still up, right? If I
Sure.
just go to direct, if I'm not priming the pump by opening them up to have the conversation.
Okay. So I'm just curious because I wrote down open-ended questions because I know that we're taught in sales to have more of an open-ended question type of question. And I'm just curious, in this case, this is a really close-ended, not that it's good or bad, right or wrong. I'm just curious, do you get people that say no? Or is this so like a more of a rhetorical question? Or are you soliciting a response from somebody where they're literally saying, yes, you know what, Merritt, I'm interested in more? I mean, is that what you're looking for? Or what's the response you're trying to get?
Yeah, I really am looking for them to acknowledge verbally, not so much for my benefit, but for
Okay,
their own benefit.
sure. Okay.
When I ask somebody, are you open to this or that? I want them to hear themselves say that they are in fact open to whatever is the end of the sentence.
Okay.
Um, because if I, again, if I just ask, let's just make it a simple example. If I say, hey Dave, you want to go to a horror movie this weekend? You could easily say no, right? You
Right.
could say yes, that could be
Right.
easy, but you could say no
Sure.
for a number
Yep.
of reasons, right?
Yep.
But if I say, are you open to catching a horror movie this weekend? Then you have to, like, it's just that, like, a pause. Like,
Yeah,
you
sure.
have to think, am I open to that?
Yeah.
It's not as quick an automatic conditioned response.
Good.
Like, if you were to go into a store and the friendly, helpful salesperson says to you, can I help you? And
Yeah.
you automatically know that the conditioned response is, no, thank you, just looking.
Yep. Yep.
This was back in the days that we actually went into stores, I guess. Now we buy everything
Yep.
online, but, no,
Yep.
thank you, just looking. Well, there isn't an automatic conditioned response for, are you open to?
That's
It
great.
really requires somebody to actually ask themselves, am I open to that?
Yep.
Yeah, I like to be open. So, okay.
Wow. And that's funny because I laugh all the time at, that question, can I help you? And for whatever reason, it's okay to lie to salespeople, right? Because we walk in and no, just looking, it's like, oh my gosh, you're at a furniture store. Are you really seriously? You just bought new furniture and it's 80 degrees out and you're just have nothing to do. So you're just going to walk the store. I mean, well, I don't know. It's just funny how we have that protection mode, like right from the onset, and
Exactly.
so I love how these four words really break that down. So again, for the people listening, just think about how, well, put it this way, are you open to changing your the way that you are in order to, to get that wall to be dropped. Because I think that's one of the big things that we in sales try to do is get somebody to trust you or like you, so that there is a kind of a mutual wall dropping. It's really hard to try and sell something to somebody that has no interest in your product.
Yeah. And I think the work that you do with disc profiles, this could be a nice complement to that as well. So if you think about it, a typical, steady relator, person who scores high in that category, is generally somebody who's going to take a longer time to make a change. They're going to really think through all of the angles of a decision process, and it might take them a little bit longer to actually make a decision versus somebody who's more of that dominant personality style and, risk taker, quick decision maker. So let's pretend you wanted to apply this "are you open to" strategy to a particular behavioral style that was outside of yours, right? And maybe you're trying to relate better. So I might say to a steady relator, like, are you committed to the decision making process that you typically use, or are you open to considering a new way of going about making this particular decision?
Gotcha.
They've never had to consider that before, but just that one little phrase gets them to pause and say, and maybe they're not. They're like, no, you know what? My decision-making process has served me pretty well. I'm going to stick with it. And then good, at least you know where you're at, right?
Absolutely.
You're not losing, you're just asking a question.
Yeah. And it's funny, the S people, the steady people, super accommodating anyway. So they're probably never going to say no.
Good point.
They can't bear to hurt somebody. But I tell you what, the high D, the driven, results oriented person that's got 10 seconds and you're already 4 seconds into it with your first 4 words, they're easy to say, no, I'm not open to that. But, I think that, again, different personalities will all react in different ways. I don't think there'll be any blanket statements there. So,
yeah, those high Ds, I mean, they would be the ones most likely to say, no, I'm not open because this is what I've already decided, right? Like, this is the way it's going to go. And, at least you know what you're dealing with if you're going to go down that path. But they also have such high regard, and usually I find in my experience, those people have gotten to high levels of business because they're fast decision makers, but they also have other qualities that lead them to be the types of people that are surrounding themselves with other good strategic thinkers and creative people. And so they are generally, open to other ideas before they make a quick decision. Like, I know you're a risk taker, you're the business owner, you're a good decision maker. Are you open to having a conversation about some of these other aspects so that we can make sure that the decision you make is a good one?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at the mind shift, or I'm sorry, the mindset, the skills, and the action, there's kind of 3 different chunks there. There's your mindset, then there's your actual skill set that you have, and then there's the action that you would take. Do you feel like any one of those are more important in this situation, or do they all kind of have the equal third type of importance to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. We teach what we call the Open for Business framework, right? Okay. So the framework is made up of these 3 parts, and our labels for them are very similar to what you just said. So mindset, mechanics, and motion is how we would describe like actions, behaviors, skills as an example. Gotcha. Okay. So mindset, if you think about mindset, is what you think. The mechanics of a thing is what you say, and motion is what you do. Gotcha. So if we break it down in that way, obviously all 3 of those are going to be important to anything that you are doing in life. And for the purposes of our conversation, sales, business development, leadership, you do want to be balanced, or you want to have a good enough handle on all 3 of those issues to be competent in each area. But what I have found is it's interesting because different people enter the game in different in one of those different categories. So most people, when they're looking to make an improvement in something, will go to, I have to learn more skills,
Sure.
right? So people are going to, if I ask people, do you think you need to work on your sales mindset or your action plan or your skills? They'll probably say, well, I'm not really sure what I'm saying, if I'm saying all the right things, if I'm
Yep.
introducing myself properly or saying the right things on a sales call. So they'll start with the mechanics of the thing. What do I say?
Right.
And because they're working on stronger mechanics, they're more excited, they're more in action. So working on mechanics has a positive impact on being in motion. And when you're in motion, you're seeing more, you're starting to see some results that shifts your mindset. So
Okay.
that's a great, a great pathway. I've seen it worked in other ways too. Some people, we do in our business some 30-day challenges, and I might have somebody work on, for the next 30 days, I'm going to work with you. You're going to build your prospect list. We're going to redefine your ideal target. And then we're going to make a plan for you to do outreach. And then you're going to track your activities and your results. And so they're really focused on motion. And because they're starting to feel like they have more of a game plan, they're in control and their structure, that shifts their mindset. And that gives them a little bit more confidence to try a few new skills. So you can really start in any one of those three. What I always do first is have my clients do a SWOT analysis so they can really get a good objective assessment of what is the strong suit that I have now and where are the weaker areas and how do I lean into those strengths to build up those weaker areas. And that's where I always look first is let's see where we're starting from and then lean into the strengths, build up the others.
So your SWOT analysis is your strengths and your weaknesses, and then your opportunities and your threats, correct?
Exactly.
So
Yes.
is that looking at my sales career, my sales path? Is that looking at my company? What is that SWOT analysis actually, digging into?
Yeah. So we actually developed at Select Sales, we developed two versions of it. One is what we call our Swift SWOT, and it's just a high level view. It's great for individual sale producers, business owners, if you're doing the thing, it's just asking you some very tip of the iceberg questions, but it gets us at least thinking about and being able to identify at a high level, it would be useful for you to sharpen up your skills or ask yourself some questions, do a belief inventory to see where your mindset is or just get into more action. And then there's another version of it. We call this one the sales SWOT on steroids because it's a really in-depth version of it. So the steroid version is going to ask a lot more questions about the specific pieces of your sales process and how comfortable you are executing those aspects. And that gives us as coaches and trainers a lot more insight into some of the very specific things that we work on to make improvements.
So the SWOT side of it is as telling as you want it to be. I mean, strengths and weaknesses tend to be more inward and the opportunities and threats tend to be more outward, like the market or the competition or the customer, things like that. Is that kind of follow in suit for your SWOT analysis as well?
A little bit. We're not so focused in these tools about the outside threats. We're really looking at how is your internal wiring or your sales process or your action plan posing a threat to your ability to be successful. But it's everything that we measure in the SWOT analysis is something that an individual can immediately take control of and make a difference because, there's only so much you can't do anything about outside threats, right? The economy is going to do what the economy is going to do and whatever. All of us were, pretty much hijacked with COVID, right? Like nothing I can do to fix that. But I can look internally. I can shift my approach. I can take control of my mindset. I can be in action differently. I can make sure I'm balancing my empathy for what others are going through with my assertiveness to recommend solutions that really can solve problems, even in spite of difficult times. And so there's a lot of things that I can do from my own individual perspective. And that's where I like to always make sure that my work is centered around things that you can control in spite of anything going around.
Gotcha. And I think that's what's important about the mindset piece is that we control that. I've run into plenty of people that are victims. I've run into plenty of people that are victors. I mean, you choose a lot of times what your mindset's going to be. So as we, I mean, for me, case in point was like when the COVID started in whatever 2020, whatever it started, I had never, ever even been on a Zoom call prior to 2020. Right. And so I thought to myself, 2020 comes along. I'm like, oh my gosh, my clients that I see every day, week or month, they were like, hey, you're not, don't show up here. We're having some issues. And so I had to my mindset was, what are my options? It could have been easy to just be like, oh, I guess we're done, shut her down. Let's, be a cart boy at Walmart or whatever, but I was able to do that mindset shift, I guess I'm going to call it. And that doesn't come natural for a lot of people. So I really want to encourage people listening today that if that is you're struggling with your mindset, maybe that's the place to start, because it's easy to work on the mechanics. It's easy to do the motion part, at least from my perspective, and skip that mindset. And hopefully, Merit said, that will engage it. But if it doesn't, man, you're really kind of only working on 2 of the 3 cylinders. So, I just want to make sure that we point that out, that piece.
It really is a big piece. So the challenge is, it's fashionable to say, oh yeah, you should work on strengthening your mindset. And then people are kind of left with, yeah, well, how exactly do I do that?
What does that mean?
Exactly. So we've actually come up with 3 distinct parts of what we consider a strong sales mindset or a strong business development mindset. And that would be your internal mind. So that's what you say to yourself. Okay. And that's where you can really do a belief inventory. And we look at the hand-me-down beliefs, like that sweater you got from your cousin that just never fit right. Yep. But it's still in your closet and you never really questioned it. It's just there. So we would challenge you, like, why is this hand-me-down belief the one that won the game? Why not, now that you can look at it, you can either freely choose it because it supports you, or you can shift it and rewrite it for yourself. So that's internal mind. The second piece is what we call behavioral mindset. And that really is everything that you're doing with DISC, because it's what your actions say to other people. Right. So it's how you interact. It's how well you understand how you're wired, so you can adjust your approach and be more impactful with other people and speak their behavioral language. So incredibly important. And the third piece of the puzzle is emotional mindset. And that's really how well we understand our own triggers and how we impact how our emotions impact other people. So certainly for leaders, if you've ever had a boss and they've walked in with, and they're kind of in a bad mood and everybody around them is like, oh God, what did I do? Right? We all internalize it. We make it about us. It could be that, they couldn't find their socks this morning, right? It has nothing to do with you. But emotional mindset is incredibly important, especially in challenging times and a lot of chaos. And certainly I would say at the time we're recording this, there's always going to be uncertainty in the marketplace. But right now I feel like we're still on top of it. And that's why it's very important. We use emotional intelligence assessments to really help people understand this is the wiring that you're going to layer all of those skills and action plans on top of. Sure. And if you don't have impulse control, as an example, or you're not flexible, then you're going to have a hard time, no matter what strong skills you have, no matter how good your action plan is. Those things are going to fall through the cracks because it's just on a shaky foundation. So you got to build from the inside out.
There's so much there. So what's hand-me-down hand-me-down beliefs?
Hand-me-down beliefs. Yeah. Things like, okay, I'll give you a perfect example. When I was in my 20s, I was having a conversation with my uncle. He's one of my mentors. He's always been a good voice of reason in my career. And I remember him saying to me in my mid 20s, if you can make $100,000, you'll be in really good shape. Like you'll be killing it.
Yeah.
And that was true when
Sure.
I was in my early to late, I would say even through my early 30s, before
Sure.
I had a kid, before I was
Yeah.
married, right before like I wanted other things in life. And I never shifted that belief. So I went pretty much all through my 30s going, 100 grand, I'm killing it, like,
Right.
woo, this is great.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
all of a sudden, like, I wanted more stuff. I had bigger dreams. I looked around. I was like, wait, this is not a lot of money anymore.
Sure.
Life changed.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I didn't adjust that belief. And I had to really dig in there because you could see like I had ups and downs in my sales cycle. I would kill it one month and then I would self-correct down. It was like a roller coaster ride that so many commission
Yep.
salespeople, business owners deal with. And I
Sure.
finally had to get in there and go, wait a minute, this is crushing me.
Yeah.
Like I need to shift my thinking about what's possible for income.
Yep.
And there was nothing else to do besides expanding my own ideas, my own beliefs about my self-worth and what was possible in my industry and the value I was bringing, how much
Sure.
more valuable I was then versus when I started. And so
Sure.
raising my pricing, all of that.
I just had that happen today. I was on with my producer of the podcast, and we got our, you can rate podcasts 1 to 5, right? And so we
Yeah.
have all these 5s. I mean, every one of them was a 5, except for there was one that was a 1. And we're looking for like who it was. We couldn't find it. And it like irritated me. And I was like thinking to myself, there's that internal mindset. There's a whole bunch of positive ones. Why in the world do you not just live there? No, Dave's got to go figure out what the heck happened with this one. I want to go knock on their door. I want to eat,
What can I do?
What can I do
I'm
to
sorry.
get you a 5? Can I pay you? What did I mess up here? It's crazy. So I really appreciate that internal mindset piece, because we all have that inner battle. I'm assuming some probably more than others.
Yeah.
But the other chunk I want to touch on as we start to land the plane is the emotional mindset, the EQ piece, because we do a lot of work with EQ as well and assess people. But I think that there's like, what I like about what you're talking about is how, help us understand how this can help our sales, because,
Yes.
there's emotional intelligence books out there that say the difference between low EQ and high EQ, you make more money, up to $29,000 a year, if I remember the number right. I mean, there's a lot of research out there. How does this overlay onto sales to help, a sales professional listening right now?
This is probably one of my favorite topics because, well, not to pick on COVID, but since we all had this universal shared experience, it's easy to cite an example that everybody can relate to.
Sure.
So if you think back to March of 2020, none of us knew what was happening. Everyone's stressed out about it. Nobody knew what to do. Okay. And we are all empathetic. Most of us, unless you were a narcissist, you were empathetic to other people's experience dealing with the same environment.
Sure.
So a salesperson, if you imagine a salesperson who scores super high in empathy and very low in assertiveness, they might pick up the phone, maybe, to just check in on their clients or their people on their prospect list. Hey, how are you? I just wanted to check in. Things are crazy out there. If I can be of any help, let me know. Right now, they may be sitting there with the perfect solution that could be exactly what maybe they sell Zoom or, sanitizer, but they're not offering it because they're so empathetic to other people and they're so low on assertiveness. Now, if we flip that and say somebody scores high in an emotional intelligence assessment on assertiveness, but very low on empathy, well, then they could care less what's going on, COVID or not. Like, I got goals to make. I got a quota. So they're going to blow past. They're not even going to say, hey, how are you? They're going to be like, did you want to buy, my stuff?
How many? Yep.
right? So that guy's a jerk and you don't want to deal with him.
Sure.
In that situation, and with, the key to emotional intelligence really is we don't necessarily need to be high scoring in all 15 attributes that we can assess these days. We want to
Okay.
be balanced. So somebody who's balanced in empathy and assertiveness, as an example, would say something like, hey, I wanted to put in a call. It's an incredibly difficult, challenging time. And I can't even imagine what you must be going through. But if you're open to it, uh, can we have a conversation
Sure.
about something that we actually could control today? About a
Sure.
solution that might actually help you find some relief in this challenging time.
Gotcha.
And that language is a demonstration of a sales professional balancing their empathy for others and their assertiveness for their solutions. And it's magic. And you heard me throw in, are
Yep.
you open to? So
Yeah.
that's literally the most perfect sentence in the world.
Well, that's so cool. And so you're kind of using emotional intelligence as a filter to make sure that you're not to one extreme or the other. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say?
I think that's putting it
Okay.
very well. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I mean, we all have, an emotional reaction to something, and some
Yes.
of us are able to control it better than others, and that's where the self-regulation piece comes in. But there's a lot of people, I think, Merritt, that don't even know that it's a blind spot for them. They have no self-awareness at all. I mean, I always laugh
Yeah.
when I'm driving and we're getting on the freeway, and it's rush hour and it's supposed to be every other car, right? I don't know where that came from, but somewhere in the world, somebody said, hey, let's just do every other car. Well, there are a few emotionally not intelligent people that feel that, you're not getting ahead of me, that 25 feet of car space, I'm just going to, edge you out. And I get that. It's just, it kind of shows in our everyday life. And I'm just curious how that transitions to salespeople. And you did a great job of covering that. So for the people listening, that's where it would be really helpful to kind of really check in with yourself, and do some self-discovery on how, effective your sales is when it comes to the emotional intelligence, side of that. So are your
And if I could
assessments?
just
Oh, go
add
ahead.
in
Yeah,
one,
absolutely.
can I add in one little thing on that?
Yes, for sure.
Because I think there is a perception that, if you are to do an emotional intelligence assessment or something, it's not always about like flying off the handle or being unable to like regulate your moods or temper.
Hmm.
It's really also about things like impulse control, right? So if I teach you good questioning skills, as an example, in the mechanics of selling, like how to
Yep.
ask better questions, but you don't have impulse control, then it doesn't matter that you learn good questions. You're going to blurt out an answer when somebody that has asked you a question, rather than find out why did they ask you that question, which is clearly the more important piece in the sales process. So
Gotcha.
I just always make sure that when I'm talking about emotional intelligence, it's much more deep than temper or moods. It's
Gotcha.
really, yeah, awareness so that you can appropriately adjust. Because when we understand what has influence over us, we are much more able to be influential with others.
Okay. So how do we, and thanks for pointing that out, because I was looking at it purely as, from a different perspective. And so how would a sales professional listening, tap into that if they're not really aware of it? I mean, I think about accountability. And I think if I don't have accountability, I may not know where my emotional intelligence is. I don't have anybody to kind of bounce ideas off or say, oh my gosh, I
Right.
really messed this up, I struggle with that. When you're working with people, Merritt, how do you accommodate for that accountability so that they're able to, continue to move up with their emotional intelligence rather than just kind of go stagnant?
Well, first of all, I think this is one of those assessments where, you definitely want a scientifically validated tool. Otherwise, I mean, you could buy a $5 emotional intelligence assessment, from Barnes and Noble, like a little paper,
Sure.
fill it out. Here's how you
Yep.
are. Please don't do that. Those are incredibly dangerous. This is not one of
We
those
love you,
areas.
Barnes and Noble.
No, yeah, sorry. Barnes and Noble, great, but just not that particular thing. Like, you're not going to
Exactly.
give yourself a blood test and
Yeah.
then like try to figure out what that means. Go to a professional,
There
whether
you
it's
go.
me or someone else. You offer these assessment
Yep.
tools, but
Good
a
call.
scientifically validated tool, super
Absolutely.
important when you're
Yep.
talking about something as critical as your own emotional responses. Like,
Right.
don't mess with that.
Yeah, for sure.
And rather than I used to, and I'm not super proud of this, but I used to just do an assessment with one debrief, and that was the end of it. And
Okay.
now I only really offer it as a 3-pack of
Gotcha.
coaching sessions, and they're
Gotcha.
spaced out because first
Yeah.
we want to look at, here's what the profile tells us. We want to build a plan for you to get into action. Then we want to check in,
Right.
how did that go with your
Yep.
focus on this? You tried these specific things. And then we want to, check in another 30 days after that. So it's a process. It's not something that's going to change overnight. But
Yep.
what I love about emotional intelligence is it is something that you can change. You can take control. You can decide to make an improvement in an area. And the difference between being great at something and not really feeling comfortable with it is very slight shifts
Sure.
in something like this. So it's exciting to see people get excited about their own growth.
Yeah, and this is one of the topics where I love to talk about because it is one of those that you can work on improvement and it equals more money or it equals more success or whatever, whatever your goal is in your life, it pushes you in that direction. So, and I think we all have been to the gym on January 1st, and by January 7th or 10th or 14th at the latest, we're pretty much back to, where we were, unless we have an accountability partner, a coach, there's somebody there to encourage us. There's somebody there to, come alongside us. And I think that's where, that's the difference between the $5 piece that, Merritt talked about and what she's offering is there's somebody there for you. Because what do you do when you have these words on the paper and you're struggling? Excuse me, you can't call the author of the book or you can't call Mr. Barnes or Mr. Noble because they're probably not going to help you, so that's what I think is really important about that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So, there's so much here.
Don't enroll your spouse in trying to help you grow on anything like that, or you will end up like me.
Well, and that's the thing about it. Oh my gosh. I mean, I know business owners, husbands and wives, and I'm like, you guys, let's not do that if we can. I mean, let's have very strict boundaries. If we're going to do that, let's make sure that we're, really going in eyes wide open. And I think to your point, going into a situation where a husband or a wife or a spouse, whatever significant other becomes that accountability partner, that's just that can not be a real positive spot to be. So cool. Well, thank you so much for this. There's so much here. I got a couple questions and then I'm going to let you go. I want to know what Merritt Kahn's tip of the week is.
Tip of the week. I am reading a book called 4,000 Weeks, and I'm going to go with that as my tip of the week. It's actually legitimately changing how I think about productivity, time management, life goals. It is definitely not your everyday time management book. So I'm listening to it on Audible. I highly recommend it. That would be my tip for you of the week.
Oh my gosh, 4,000 weeks. I'm assuming that's the average lifespan of a human. Is that what the 4,000 comes from?
That is.
Excuse me. I hope I didn't ruin it for anybody, but I just.
Well, never mind.
That's me. Exactly. Save the $29. You don't have to buy the book now. So no, that's funny. So then the other question is, what's one thing that most people don't know about you that you feel comfortable sharing?
Most people don't know that I am a stand-up comedian.
Oh my gosh, we didn't get any of that.
Yeah, I've been paid. So technically I am a professional. But I wrote, produced, and performed a one-woman inspiring comedy show about the ups and downs of my 50 years on the planet. And it's really it was really an exercise in rewriting the good and bad parts of my life through a lens of comedy. And so I will be touring that show starting at the end of this year. I'm going to be taking it on the road. We'll do some shows in my hometown in Denver, and then I'll probably take it to Chicago and some other places. So if you'd
Oh
like
my
to be on the
gosh.
list and know about when that is, like,
Oh,
get
I love it.
on my
Oh my
list
gosh,
there.
that'd be awesome. You just can't use me as a, yeah. The funny thing is you always, people like to always pick on the guy in the front row, you know? So that's
That is
awesome. Well,
true.
congratulations. That's way
Thanks.
cool.
Thanks.
So yeah, so there's just so much here. And for the people listening, I really just want to encourage you to, not just turn this off, not just go on to the next piece, but really, find something that was here today that Merritt talked about that will really help propel you moving forward, whether it's your emotional intelligence, whether it's talking about a SWOT analysis, whether it's talking about accountability, whether it's talking about the mindset, the skills, or the action. There's so much here that if you walk away and didn't improve, we have to say that that's on you, because we gave you plenty of opportunity here. And, so if people want to learn more about you, Merritt, if they want to connect with you, let's say there's somebody that's just anxious to, talk with you more, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, I would say the best way, my website is my name. So it's merrittKahn.com, MERITKAHN. And if you go to that site, there'll always be a let's talk button. You can always just book 15 minutes on my calendar. Let's have a conversation. How can I help? And if you put a /podcast on that merrittKahn.com /podcast, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yep.
That'll take you to a special page that I do for interviews like this. And that gives you access to that free SWOT analysis that I mentioned. If you go ahead and fill that out, I will actually personally read your review report, and
Yep.
I will do a custom video, not a boilerplate like
Uh-oh.
response, but like, Dave, you said this on question 7, and this what this means. And I will do a personal
Wow.
video for you so that you know exactly where you want
Woo.
to put some focus and attention. Yeah,
Oh
good
my
stuff.
gosh. Now, if you don't get anything out of this, now it's totally on you, the listener, because she's even going to help you with personalized video. That's fantastic. And that's why we do this every week, because it is hard to do this alone. I totally get that. And there's so many great people out there like Merritt, and she just wants to help, whether it's 15 minutes, on a calendar, whether it's a SWOT analysis or whatever. Pick up a copy of our book. So thank you so much. I got one last question for you. Are you open to doing this again?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for
Awesome.
asking.
Cool. See how that is. See, I just wanted to put it in action. I just want to make sure everybody knows that, I can actually learn something while I'm listening here today. So again, thank you so much, Merritt, for coming, and look forward to learning more about you in the days to come, and hear about this comedy routine. That's even a different twist. So I'm excited to learn more. So thank you so much again for hanging out with us.
Thanks for having me.